Hello, everybody. My name's Carl Jeffrey from Digital Ship, and welcome to our webinar, Visibility of Your ETS Exposure. So we're here today to talk about ways you can get a better understanding of where you are with, compliance with the EU Emissions Trading Scheme. So that's a requirement for shipping companies with vessels in EU ports to buy allowances for the carbon they emit from January the 1st, 2024. And our focus today is not so much on describing the regulations themselves, but more on how you can be better aware of what your exposure is and how digital tools can help. So you need to make sure you're buying the allowances you're supposed to, making sure you're recouping costs back from your customers and getting an understanding of costs which you can't recoup back, such as when the vessel is off hire. And we're hearing so far that many companies are trying to manage it using Excel. So our experts think that that might be possible if you've got maybe just one ship, but as soon as you've got more than one ship and you've got different emissions and different port calls and different customers all buying allowances at different times, it all gets extremely complicated very quickly, and we'll go into more depth about why that is. So we've got three short presentations today from Ocean Score, Heckler Emissions Management, and 044. Our purpose today is helping you understand what sort of tools and services can help you rather than giving a showcase of specific technology. So I should point out these aren't the only companies offering services in the sector, and there's quite a big market. There'll be room for plenty more companies in the market. So first today, we're going to hear from Albrecht Grell. He's Managing Director of Ocean Score, a Hamburg headquartered company that has an end-to-end solution for shipping to manage ETS exposure, along with other digital solutions for the industry supporting sustainability. And Albrecht also lectures in business at Kuhne Logistics University in Hamburg, and he's a former Executive Vice President of Digital Solutions and Innovation with DNV. And second, we're going to hear from Øyvind Stuerdal, who's on the management team of Heckler Emissions Management. That's a joint venture between Wilhelmsen Ship Management and the ship broker Affinity Shipping. Heckler assists ship owners and charterers with EU ETS compliance obligations. And Øyvind is a former head of data and performance management with Wilhelmsen Ship Management, and he's in Oslo, Norway. And third, we're going to hear from Friederike Hesse, who's the co-founder and managing director of 044, based in Berlin, Hamburg, and Singapore. The company focuses on digital solutions for decarbonization in shipping and is backed by several investors in the shipping industry. And Friederike has a background in building digital products, working with the German government, and also as managing director of one of Germany's largest facility management companies. So you can enter questions for speakers in the Q&A box at any time. We should have time to take questions at the end, or maybe speakers can answer questions by typing while they're not presenting. So please, can you say who a question is for if you type it in? And I'd like to invite Albrecht to start his talk. Cheers.
All right. So thanks a lot, Carl, for inviting us to this webinar. I think it's a great initiative to have all the three of us on stage in parallel to give a more comprehensive view of what's going on. You should be seeing my screen now. Very good. Thanks, Friederike. You're never quite sure with Zoom these days. I will be talking largely about best practice management in EU ETS. We are in the lucky position that we're working with currently around 70 partners in their ETS management environment or in the ETS management. And my first point would be that best practice actually really depends on the perspective you are taking. Whether you're a charterer, a third-party manager, an owning manager, all that really defines best practice, and there's very many different angles to it. Same is true for the question whether you're European or non-European setup, whether you're corporate or working through SPVs if you're an owner. Again, many different perspectives. So I will not be coming with a cooking recipe of how to do EU ETS management, but more with highlighting the dimensions that are relevant in this context, right? And I've decided to break this down into 5 chapters or 5 points to discuss. So the first one is the legal framework, so everything around shipments and charter parties. The second one is the setup for the system, so union registry account, access to EUAs and the like. And then we have the discussion around data management, the corporate management processes, and finally your trading strategy. So these are the 5 dimensions that I would like to touch in our discussion here. And I'll start with the contractual and the legal setup. Knowing from our customers, even though ETS has entered into force now 25 days ago, quite a few of the shipments and charter parties have not yet been finally agreed. We certainly hope that they're all in discussions, but there's still room to move, and we think this should happen very, very soon. On the shipment and charter party side, the first question in the shipment discussion between managers and owners actually is who takes responsibilities. There is different options available, and we're not going to go into detail of these, but if there is owners in this call and owners contemplate taking on that responsibility, you will have to discuss the issue of capabilities and resources in your organization. So are you actually really able to have access to the data and access to resources to manage these processes? Owners who are organized in SPVs will potentially face a challenge in efficiently complying because this will happen SPV by SPV. So corporate structures have a benefit, and that might tilt them towards moving responsibility towards the manager. And then there will be this discussion around, does the manager simply run the process on behalf of the owner, or does the manager actually take on the real responsibility? Again, these are all questions in the context of, is the owner actually really in a position to run this process to efficiently manage the ETS exposure? As a next step, when we talk shipments, we believe very much in simplicity. My hunch is that what BIMCO proposes in their clauses that have been published in early December is a bit complex. We would typically try in shipments, or we see our customers try to avoid the forecasting requirements between owners and managers because they're typically not at a very relevant level. And if there is a discussion between who actually buys the EUAs, is it the manager or the owner? Again, the one who actually runs the processes typically has a better position to buy rather than, again, sharing that responsibility and making it more complex. And the charter parties, again, BIMCO has proposed clauses. These we actually like quite a bit. We see those not really being adopted by the industry, but people adopt things that are quite close to them for good reason. Big discussions that we see are around counterparty risk. There's a lot of nervousness about actually being able to get the EUAs from the charterer. We don't think that this counterparty risk is particularly different from any other counterparty risk in shipping, but it's something that needs to be considered all the way down to actually requesting prepayments if that's needed for a certain EUA exposure. And then we have the issue of settlement funds versus EUAs. Again, we very much prefer EUAs to take away the price risk of settling in cash. And if you as an owner or manager has a chance to ask for EUA settlement, get them settled in EUAs and try to avoid getting cash. I'm not going to spend much time on the union registry accounts. We just basically hope that you're all there now, that you have them at least either opened or are in the process of opening them, and that you are in the process of being able to acquire EUAs for your own needs. As Carl said, you will need EUAs for situations of off-hires, of unemployment, or if a charterer decides to provide you with cash. Just a little notion on the trading accounts that you can open today and that should be starting to open if you haven't opened them yet. For third-party managers who are trading with multiple owners or working with multiple owners, there could be a strategy to have multiple trading accounts. It's a nightmare to open them, but it's a nightmare only once. And if you have multiple accounts, you have more clarity and can show these account statements actually to the owners without divulging information about other companies. So basically, when it comes to getting the setup right, I hope you are nearly there or you are there. If not, this is really time to act now. Second point, or third point actually in this context I want to discuss is the emissions data. Data quality is a significant issue. In the old MRV regime, it was taken semi-serious because it's just compliance and there was no real penalty attached to not perfect data. Now this can come extremely expensive if charterers, for example, refuse to contribute EUAs based on data that they consider wrong. I'm personally a bit skeptical. I think I shared that with many of our customers about the need to verify every single voyage leg. But what you certainly need is a proven player, a trusted player in the industry with significant digital capabilities to be able to share data in a proper format, in a solid structure, and to actually work with APIs. We're seeing a wide mix here of people and solutions where this really works with the APIs, and other environments where APIs just simply don't seem to work or don't provide the data that is needed. So data quality is more important than the formal side. On the management processes in your companies, my hunch is, and when we discuss this with clients, especially the somewhat medium-sized and smaller ship managers, there's a strong focus on the data, on the technical side of things, but that the relevance of management processes is somewhat undervalued. It's important to understand for the whole ETS value chain, from receiving correct high-quality data to on shore, all the way down to actually making sure that EUAs you have requested from the charterers, that the process steps are clearly defined, that responsibilities are allocated, who takes care of the technical side, who takes care of the charter party information, the charter party agreements, and how and when to request EUAs, etc., all the way down to checking the accounts, that these processes must be clearly defined in terms of who does it, what needs to be done, how often and when is this done. And my feeling is that this is where most companies have the biggest steps to take in terms of being really clear on those processes. What we all three here offer is some type of solution to support these processes. And so as part of defining these processes, it's obviously an important step to decide on your digital support for these solutions. It won't be doable with Excel in the end, that's what we all believe, but how do you plan to support and efficiently structure these processes from a digital perspective will be important, especially when we're talking in a digital ship seminar today. And then the last point, monitoring and reporting is a standard process in shipping. We clearly use to the financial side of it, but we propose to take a very strong process view as well to make sure that we're not losing track of what has been requested, what needs to be requested, where do we have potential disputes on the EUAs requested, etc., because that will become a very expensive failure if we don't clear on the process side per vessel. Last not least, in what we perceive as best practice in our client discussions is a trading strategy. Again, most partners kind of have pushed this a bit towards the end of their preparation. They probably have access to EUAs by now. Not all have, but I believe most have, to what we see. And there's a couple of points that come out from our discussions with our partners here. One is, we believe shipping is not best positioned to try to speculate, to try to buy EUAs low and sell them high. That can be done maybe by the owners privately, but we believe it's not the industry to do this. I've pasted to the right here the price development over the last 12 months, and you see how volatile the market is. And then you have a very strong intraday volatility of up to €5 per day. And you just don't want to be caught on the wrong foot when you speculate here. It's just not our business. There's different ways to minimize the cash flow burden, especially if you are in commercial operations as well, and you are fixing voyages based on certain EUA price assumptions. There's options to work with forwards or with futures. We like forwards more than futures, but there are different options to do this. There's an issue about the volumes. Many EUA sources ask you to buy EUAs in certain volumes of 500 or 1,000 pieces per trade. For an off-hire, you will not need more than 5 or maybe 6, 7, 10 EUAs currently. So the 1,000 sitting somewhere could be quite a significant burden for the cash flow. We've seen many players trying to shop around for best prices on EUAs. Now, if you're MSC needing millions of EUAs, that's probably worth it. But EUAs are a commodity. The price differences in the end won't be significant. But the effort to sign up with different traders to go through your customer processes is significant. And we would propose to not do that, but to focus on one or maximum two partners with simple, lean, easy to use processes, good digital integration, and that's it. And not worry about price differences here. And again, I mentioned the intraday volatility, so the changes of the price of EUAs in a day, during a day, it's significant. So if someone provides you with cash, there's a huge risk that you are hitting the wrong button in the wrong minute in terms of the price. So ideally, if you work on cash basis, try to work off a prepayment and then invoice basis rather than a simple settlement on cash to just minimize your price risk. That's already coming to an end. Thank you for your attention. Curious to questions either now or later. And again, Carl, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk today.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, this stuff is much more complicated than any of us thought, and it seems to get more and more complicated the more I hear about it. So feel free to put your questions in for Albrecht in the Q&A box. And meanwhile, we'll go to Oslo to hear from Øyvind Stjordal, who's on the management team of Hekla Emissions Management. So I'll pass over to Øyvind. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Carl. I'll share my screen. Do you see it?
Yep.
Very good. I have a very difficult name to pronounce, and that's my fault, not your fault, Carl. So, but thank you very much for having me on board, regardless of my difficult name. I am Øyvind Stjordal, work in Hekla Emissions Management, and I thought today that I could talk a little bit about the complexities, as Albrecht also touched upon with the EU ETS for shipping. But first of all, just short about Hekla Emissions Management. We are a joint venture between Affinity Shipping and Wilhelmsen Ship Management, 50-50 owned, and we offer full EU ETS compliance services. So we have mapped up all the processes that's required to succeed and comply with the ETS, and then sort of provide services along that way. At the moment, we have around 750 ships under contract, and we are seeing quite significant uptake in the market. So that is good, because this is a hot but also a complex topic. And I think this touches upon a little bit of what Albrecht said as well. I think owners out there today are scratching their head in terms of coping with ETS. It's a lot of questions, everything from interpreting the regulations that has been gradually introduced to the market, but also quite late compared to when the regulation actually takes effect from 1st of Jan. All the way to sort of, are the charters, your counterparts, ready to send you EUAs? Do you have the correct clauses in your charter parties? Are you equipped to receive EUAs, etc., etc.? Data quality is one element, data verification, and all of these things that's picking up from the ship owner's side, basically, as we go. I want to take a step back and just to explain to everyone that why it is so complex. And if you look at ETS for the shipping industry, it's fundamentally different than for a traditional industry that's under ETS today. And the reason for that is that you have sort of separated the compliance element with the polluter pay principle. Since we have charters in shipping, EU has made sort of a stand that you have one entity is responsible for payments and one entity that's responsible for compliance. And this creates complexity. And you also have a second element now where you can outsource the ETS and MRV responsibility to the ship manager or the ISM code holder, which again adds another layer of complexity. And then you have the data question. You need to get data from the ship and then have it presented in a professional way to the charters as an emission report. And this also creates a little bit of issues in an industry that's sort of used to the MRV annual cycle, and now the requirements are sort of picking up in terms of frequency. Data verification, validation is also a question, which we believe a lot of charters will require the third-party independent company to verify the data. And then you have the element of EUAs. EUAs ideally should be transferred from the charter to the ship owner, and then potentially to the ship management company also, if the mandate is outsourced. And all of this then intensifies and becomes more complex when you look at the fleet size of the ship owner, the trading patterns, how many charters does the ship owner have as customers, and then also potentially you have multiple ship managers taking care of your fleet. So this is fundamentally different from call it the utility industry in the EU, who's also under ETS, because that's the input factors are more, and also here you're talking about moving targets for the vessels, and also the fact that you have international entities outside of EU being have to comply with the EU ETS. So that's one element of why it's complex. And then you have the registry account structures. Recently, we learned that it's the registered owner who's default responsible for EU ETS. And this could be quite okay if you have all your ships under one legal entity and one registered owner. In this example, you have 4 vessels owned by the same legal entity, and the registered owner is the same. Then you need one MOHA for that account. And in this example, the company is registered in Denmark, so the MOHA is in Denmark. You can also have a SPV structure where you have 4 different registered owners, and these can be in different countries as well. Here in this example, I've used 2 countries, Norway and Denmark. So then you're ending up with 4 MOHAs in 2 different nations. Obviously, then you have to deal with the registry, the national registries as well in those 2 nations. You can outsource it to the ISM code holder. Then in this case, the ISM code holder would be in Greece. Then you would have 1 MOHA, but it's in the name of the technical manager. And then lastly, if you have 4 vessels registered outside of Europe, I've used Panama, Marshall Islands, and Liberia here. And these MOHAs will then be defined on number of port calls that you have had over the last 4 years in EU countries. So that could be the countries you see here. So it is complex, and as Albrecht said, this really depends on the structure of each ship owner, and we all know that they vary from time to time. And then you would think that, okay, EU has this covered. They have a great system for us to deal with. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And that's not to be rude towards EU, but this is a system where we feel that we're warped back to 2005 when ETS was initially implemented. And what you see here is a screenshot of a trading account. We took it a while back when we had 5 EUAs on account. And you see that this isn't much to deal with. It's not broken down on ship-by-ship basis or voyage-by-voyage. This is what you get, basically. And we expect that the maritime operator holding accounts also will be similar to this in terms of user-friendliness. EU have said that they will upgrade the user-friendliness now, actually in January, but we haven't seen that yet, unfortunately. So what this summarizes in is that as a ship owner, you have to take action here. You have to take responsibility for the process, dedicate resources. You have to involve operation, finance, and admin to be succeeding with this and taking this seriously. you're talking about financial transactions, and this can't be taken with sort of the left hand on a part-time resource. I think you have to push the polluter pay principle as hard as possible. Obviously, that's a commercial negotiation, but this is the EU's intention. So then you need to rewrite clauses or include emissions clauses, etc., in your charter parties. You have to prepare for a heavy administrative workload. Opening trading accounts or MOHAs is requiring quite hefty documentations from the legal entities that's linked to the account. So that's also something that you need to do. I think ensure high data quality from the vessels is going to be key, because this is at the end of the day what you are call it settling the EUAs with, and that has to be as correct as possible. So getting your data verified or validated is going to be key. And then at last, as also Albert said, this is the perfect opportunity to create an Excel spreadsheet bonanza, but you don't want to go there, because it is, as we've tried to sort of communicate now, it is complex, and the more vessels you add, the higher the complexity is. So that was it from me.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's complex, but hopefully we're going to give some ways to make it easier.
Yes.
Okay, so now we'll go from Oslo to Berlin, and we're going to hear from Friederike Hesse, the co-founder and managing director of 044. So I'll pass over to Friederike. Cheers.
Thank you very much, and thank you to my two co-hosts and everything you've pointed out so far, which is all true. I'm sharing now, and I knew I was going to be last, so I thought about how do we make this not repetitive. So what I'm trying to do today is give you a little bit of our current impression on how EU ETS is working in practice. And this comes from conversations with customers, comes from conversations with prospective customers. It's not in any way a data analysis. So it's a subjective assessment, and there's also a little bit of humor in it. So let's see how that goes. So when we look at on how is it working in practice, the first thing we still feel this January is that most companies are not yet prepared. And for some, that's a very rational decision, because they say, hey, we're not so sure how our charterers or owners are going to settle on this. We want to wait and see how it goes. Others are also just underestimating it or trying to ignore it for the time being. We think that only a very small fraction of the industry has either really settled on internal processes and is supporting these with internally built systems, or they have a process in place and they have decided for either Hekla, Ocean Score, or 044, which is obviously a very good idea. We think there are 4 key areas that need to be considered, and I tried to keep it simple. You've heard similar things from Albrecht and Oyvind. So we think you need to think about your commercial EU ETS strategy, and I'm going to let you know what that means. Your charter and shipment contract clauses, obviously, your internal processes, and then the whole thing of transparency and accountability in the system. And I want to give you a small impression of how we feel the industry is organized around this. So what do I mean with commercial EU ETS strategy? Your business is unique, and you need to look at it and understand how it is affected by ETS. And it's by far not the same for every shipping company. So here we took an owner-operator case where some vessels in the fleet are owned, some vessels in the fleet are chartered in. We just took 3 vessels, and you see in the first column that there's a total of 1,650 EUAs that were emitted on EU voyages for these 3 vessels. And now we try to figure out how do we need to settle EUAs for those 3 voyages. So we look at the commercial contract or the deployment of the vessel, under which contract is our owner-operator trying to make money here. First vessel voyage charter, second vessel short-term time charter, and the third vessel is performing on a contract of affreightment. Now, In the inbound relationship, so when they chartered in the vessels, they have settled on ETS clauses already, which is great. So for the first vessel, that obviously doesn't apply because you own that vessel. Second one, you have agreed on the BIMCO time charter clause, so you're paying EUAs on a monthly basis. And then for the third vessel, you had to hire it short term to fill a gap in your fleet. You could only agree on cash payment. So you need to pay in cash after the voyage. And then outbound, first vessel on the BIMCO freight clause, second vessel on an EUA invoice, and the third vessel is on a cash invoice based on the voyage data. And these are all options to settle this. Only the BIMCO options, by the way, and there's others that are being negotiated currently in the market. Now we come to a little quiz, which is how many EUAs do you now need to buy for those 3 voyages? Is it 1,650? Is it 100? Or a sentence which we currently often hear, let's buy 5,000 just in case. Let's just be prepared. Let's buy something. And the fourth answer, which is also actually really valid, I don't have a clue. I need to look at this in more detail. The correct answer is actually 100, because this was voyage A, where you own, and you don't get EUAs from your charterer, so you need to buy these EUAs. In the second vessel case, you just pass through EUAs, you don't need to buy any. And in the third case, you're just paying cash, and in the end, the owner is buying those EUAs. So you're buying 100. But to understand this, to look at it at your business and understand how important is trading of EUAs for me after all, or do I rather have a management problem of tracking all those payments and invoices? We think that's important. And if you can, obviously, in your negotiations, if you could settle on similar ways to fix those EUA settlements, that would be great. But sometimes it's just not possible. Second part, charter and shipment clauses. My colleagues here have already explained to you there's charter clauses from BIMCO, there's a shipment clause from BIMCO. They require different things. They are listed on the left-hand side. I just brought a few quotes from the market currently. What are we hearing about charter agreement negotiations? For the big charterers in the container space, we hear that charterers want to pay once a year only. So you'll get those EUAs in 2025. So what does that mean for 2024 for your annual statements? How do you make sure that you really get those EUAs in 2025? Counterparty risk, all these things. For voyage charter, we hear a lot that people are planning to adjust their freight rates and maybe not have an explicit surcharge in voyage charters, but we'll see. Then regarding ship managers and owners, we hear from a lot of owners that they're currently leaning towards doing it themselves. But I think my colleagues were right in pointing to the difficulties in legal structures, which might bring a swing back to ship managers doing it for their owners. Then there's really still a problem in the market that signatures are missing. So negotiations are going on because all parties still need to get organized. Yeah, and then also interesting from the voyage charter, also break bulk part of the market, that also cargo owners are looking at this, obviously. And in container, they're paying surcharges, but for many other goods, they actually need to pay on a per voyage or per transport basis, and they require reports, and they want to understand what they're paying for. And then we also see lots of charterers who say we want to pay in cash and not in EUAs. So yeah, it's a very mixed bag, and you need to be prepared for this. Third part, internal processes. Again, a little thing, what could people answer you when you ask them, have you got a responsible person for EU ETS in your organization? Then we do hear from some customers, we have thoroughly analyzed our processes and have a clear understanding of who is doing what between finance, chartering, operations, fleet performance, and our ESG team. But this is rare, and obviously for a good reason, because shipping companies in most cases aren't big, and you don't even have these explicit departments. But we still, as my colleagues did in their presentations, we recommend to look at your processes, because in many cases it's rather answers B, C, or D. I think someone in the ops team is looking at this, or we ask our CFO to look at this because it seems to be foremost a financial or trading challenge. Or D, let's buy 5,000 to be on the safe side, right? But when you look at what we explained before, this is probably not the answer you should give yourself, but you should rather prepare. And then finally, transparency and accountability, and this is meant as a little summary of what I presented before, and it really mirrors what Albrecht and Øyvind have already told you. In order to be transparent and accountable across the whole thing for the full year and really follow the money that is in EUA and follow the financial risk and control that risk, it's important that you get your emissions data straight, that you understand the full fleet exposure and really base this on reliable data. You need to understand your EU ETS settlements. So the first table I showed you with all those contracts per vessel, who's owing me what, whom do I owe something and how much is that? And in what rhythm is it happening? And what happens on a monthly basis? How do I report on this? You need to set up your accounts at the union registry. We, for the time being, actually recommend focus on the trading account. This will keep you covered in 24. Look at the MOHA later. Once the EU has hopefully figured it out in a better way, you can manage everything via your trading account. So try to keep it simple. And then the trading account, we've seen it. It just shows you a big pile of EUAs. You need to match those EUAs to vessels, voyages, and charters and understand how they match your settlements and payment obligations and everything. And that's something where Excel breaks. We can promise you that. And finally, you want your organization, your stakeholders, your auditors, you want everyone informed about what you do. You want to be transparent and accountable. So in order to do that, you need those 4 first steps. And this is what I wanted to talk about. Final word on who we are. We were founded in 2022. Actually, today is our 2nd birthday. We went to the notary on 25th of January 22. We are based in Berlin, also in Hamburg and Singapore. We are 20 people now, and we have a complete CII and EU ETS solution that gives you all the emissions ratings dashboards. It gives you voyage and period planning, so you can look into the future with 044. You can do all EUA and cash settlements and trading obligations in 044. We provide union registry monitoring, and we match those EUAs for you with your actual settlement data. And we do have a trading dashboard, trading interface for ETS. We also have a growing number of solution partnerships, which is important because the data is provided by many in the market. And so we are a partner. We are very open to make data move between companies. Thank you very much.
Well, that's great, Friederike. Okay, so I'd like to invite Øyvind to put the camera on now, and we'll go into the Q&A session. So yeah, you see there's a few questions coming already, and people are giving answers on typing. I mean, I tried to think of a more general question to start things off. This issue of emissions data quality, because that's I don't know how hard that is, or and I guess if you know the fuel in the tank when you started and the fuel in the tank when you finished, but everything's always more complicated than you think. I don't know if anybody has any. Want to share some opening thoughts on the data quality challenge, or there's no sanctions I know of if you don't do it. Well, then, does anybody want to?
I can take a stab on the data quality. Obviously, there hasn't previously been any big issues with reporting, call it slightly wrong data, but this is changing now, right? And fetching data from ships that are moving into sort of areas where there's no internet coverage and all of that has been a challenge for the industry over a long period of time. Obviously, it's improving now, and I think people are realizing that it's important to focus on this process. But I think a lot of people underestimate the challenge it is to turn over 1.6, 1.7 million seafarers out there who's in all, mostly who's reporting data manually into different systems. So conveying this story that this has consequences to a large population of seafarers and get them to understand the importance is one of the key items here. And also the fact that you now are in the solutions out there in the market, you get notifications on the errors on the data on a live basis or on a daily basis, and changing the mindset to actually change these or update to correct data gradually is a challenge. But it's possible to do, but I think it needs focus from the ship manager side, basically.
Wow, that's good.
Maybe
Oh, go on. Yeah.
let me add two technical examples of where these challenges are beyond, so to say, data quality coming from ship to shore. One is, if you look at these verification regimes, and everyone is going through an MRV verifier. The MRV definition of a voyage is different from the commercial definition of a voyage. So when does control change to the charterer? So many of the MRV verification support providers or verifications of providers are basing their reporting, their data streams on the MRV definition of a voyage, which is unfortunately not extremely helpful if you are in voyage charter where the control of the vessel changes differently. One example. Second example, and we had a question already in the Q&A part here. How do I say this? The ports, for example, it's very important to understand what port you are calling, right? And the regimes will say if you're going to and from the EU, it's 50% in the EU, it's 100, to say it simply. Many of the solutions that we are seeing that are providing data, and that's working perfectly well for what they were supposed to do, are doing this on free text port names. So you have a typical ship management solution that sends data to shore and saying, we're going to Hamburg, or we're going HAM, or we're going Hamburg, Germany, or Germany, Hamburg. We have unlock codes, but many solutions don't work with those. If you are having a data solution that's working with free text just on port names, it's not going to work in the ETS context. So you have these little technical things that we're sometimes stumbling across where we're saying, oh shit, sorry, this needs to be resolved. So we have the seafarer, the general data quality issue, and then we have technical issues in making data fit for ETS purposes.
Oh, very good. I was going to go to Frederica. You busy typing, or do you want to do this one orally? Barry Hooper's question, I guess. Maybe you can. So I've seen you blogging on this thing about the difficulty in linking to the union registry, and I know the answer that you can't link to them, but you probably want to.
Exactly. I was about to type, but then I can spare me you spared me the typing. That's great. No, it's actually, I mean, the European Union, as you can imagine, is very concerned with data security and all these things. So, which is probably right, but it makes our life more painful. So we can't build a digital interface with the union registry. But what we can do is have people within our companies who access your accounts. So we typically ask our customers for read-only access to their accounts, which is possible. And then we can regularly check for transactions happening. And what we do on our end, we copy them into our system where we then match them with the other data points, so to say. And then you have a closed data loop. And this is the way to do it.
Yeah, Albrecht, I know you said at the press conference you do this an alternative. You can trade with RWE and you can integrate. And I don't know if Oyvind has something similar. Do you want to give a...
Well, no, Frederick is right. You can't, the EU union registry accounts are all, as Oyvind showed them, as Frederick described, it's a bit like going back to the 1990s. There is different levels of technical integrations, different traders. So some traders have digital solutions that you can directly link systems to, and others simply do it as we're used to by phone calls or by emails.
Right.
I think it's important to make that difference clear, right? You have carbon traders who help you buy EUAs at the stock exchange, but still in the end you need those EUAs on your own account. That's where you need to keep track of them. And this own account, there's no digital interface to that, but there might be a digital interface to your trader. So that's the difference.
Okay, so Maria was next question in. She's a planning manager with Thenamaris. We've got quite a technical question about the ports. You need UNO code. So I guess you've got to type in. I thought for the trading you just need to enter what your emissions are, not what the ports are. But does anybody want to take this one for about a?
I can take that one if I understand it correctly. I think the question is that you ask us how we identify ports that make this an EU ETS voyage, I think. So if we look for applicable commercial ports, what we just did is we took the low codes, we have a list of the relevant ports, and then we look for those ports. And if we have a data source that doesn't have the low codes, we do a mapping of that source, obviously, into our port naming. So when we map data into our system, we always know the exact port names, and then we can match and immediately identify an ETS voyage.
Okay, so we've got a complicated discussion with Takis Markatos from Liros Maritime. So he's saying that the responsible party, in this case, this is in the answered section, the third-party document holder doesn't want to be involved and is not set up to surrender. So I suppose that means a third-party ship management company. And does that mean that the actual owner has to register account? So Albrecht has answered, it depends on the details, but it's a nightmare for the special purpose vehicle-based owners. I mean, the law says that the ISM document compliance holder has to buy the documents whether they want to or not. I don't know if
well, the responsibility has been actually moved to the owner with the latest implementation act. So it is the owner, and if he doesn't find the doc holder to do it, then he is stuck, basically, right? And then if you have foreign-based SPVs, it becomes really interesting, because then you might have different countries for your MOHAs for each vessel, and then you have real fun.
But you can then also, as Frederikke said, that you can have account representatives on the MOHAs from a third-party service supplier, but you can't delegate the ISM, the MRV and ETS responsibility to anyone except for the ISM code holder. So that's a little bit a challenge, especially for companies maybe utilizing third-party ship management companies where you can't sort of control their risk appetite, I would say.
Wow, crikey. So Prince Sadotra is with a Kaizen Ship Management in Thailand. Being in Asia, how do we open a marine operator holding account? Is it time for free?
I can take that one. By 1st of February, EU is going to distribute a list of where each, call it MRV historical data ship is going to reside to as a MOHA country. So if, for instance, if you have called a Danish port over the last and you're outside of Europe as a registered owner, if your main port is a Danish port, you will reside to the Danish registry. The Danish registry, they have said that they will reach out to this entity to initiate the process. But you have, from a regulatory point of view, you have 40 days, 40 working days to apply for a MOHA. So you have to do this within a certain time frame set by the EU. But a little bit the challenge here is that the regulation is moving a little bit slow compared to when the actual regulation has been implemented. So this is a big question mark, but we have, from our view, we have already started opening MOHAs for companies. But for the entities outside of Europe, it's still a little bit difficult. We have to see by 1st of Feb.
Wow. So Dominic Ng from DNV in Singapore, head of APAC with Veracity. So he's a specialist in data. Oh, it looks like it's a question I only see half of it, but yeah. In the end, we need to account for some of these data gaps, which are probably not required for MRV annual verification. I think I need to see the Albrecht. You started this question with a discussion with Dominic. I haven't actually read the question. Do you want to continue here?
Yeah, I know Dominic quite well. Hi, Dominic. Good to see you, or at least read from you. No, the question, I think, was back to the point that I made about the difference between a commercial voyage and an MRV voyage, and the solution that is typically being taken, and Veracity actually allows for that in a very nice way, is that you enter in a separate or an additional event of the off-hire or redelivery. And so the additional events then will be tracked in Veracity or in Emissions Connect of Veracity in this context, and that will allow for it. But if you don't consider that, you will be trapped with wrong dates. So there are solutions on that, but again, you just need to be aware of it.
Wow, that's great. Friederike, we haven't heard from you for a while. So we could have a Jonathan Deeney's question. So he's performance manager with Frontline. I don't actually know anything myself about these UNLOCO codes, but I'm sure you do. Ship-to-ship operations, which are not in port limits and don't have UNLO codes. Are we sticking with the exact definition of EU regulations in these operations if they don't exist in the EU voyage? Is it 100%? Oh, crikey.
It's a very, very, very specific question.
There we go.
And I think, I mean, my colleague might be even more proficient than I. I think there's still also debates on what exactly is a port call if you have an offshore reshuffling of cargo and whatnot. So I think if you are interested to that detail, we should probably, you know, look at specific cases and understand what's going on, because the general answer you can find on the internet, but in many cases it's not really helpful yet. So yeah, we suggest to look at it.
But the simple answer is ship-to-ship transfers are not port calls, so excluded.
Okay, very good. Whoa, whoa. So another long question from Ian Paul with V-ships. Should we all read this one together? ISM companies are completing the maritime reporting verification, recording to their fleets, but transferring responsibility to the owner for 2024. Oh God, this is between this owners and ship management. Many registered owner companies in the Thetis system won't have vessels associated with them until completion of. Oh God, this is a very complicated question, isn't it? Does anybody want to take this one, or is it perhaps to do it later?
As I read it, this is the list that's going to be distributed from EU. So they will distribute it by 1st of Feb, and then several of the administering authorities have said that they will contact the companies that are under their national registry, basically. So this is how I read it. But again, it's difficult sitting outside of EU, because then you don't really know exactly what's going to be the outcome of that list, basically.
Let me try to add to that and build on what Øyvind said. In this case, there will be a process. So the EU reaches out to what they know to be the responsible party. And if that responsible party then rejects responsibility, they will obviously have to notify the administering authority of who the responsible party is. So there will be a loop in this process. And I'm not sure I share your optimism about February 1st with the EU, but
that's what it says on their web pages, but I have a tendency to agree on that one.
Okay, so Ilya is the environmental and IT manager with Ahrenkiel, Vogelmann, Bolton in Germany. If we are the document of compliance holder, but neither the DOC holder nor the owners are all based in Germany, can we make a group account that covers all the maritime operator holding accounts? No. Friederike, do you want to? No.
I think we covered it before in the presentations, right? It's to the current knowledge, I'm personally still hoping that the EU will move a bit on the MOHAs once they understand the complexity better.
Yeah,
but why I want to repeat that currently within 24, you don't necessarily need the MOHA set up, and you could wait a little bit longer. But the current understanding is what has been presented, right? That for each legal entity, you need a separate MOHA.
Okay, so Jaideep Vohra is with Director of Fleet Performance with Mid-East Ship Management in UAE. Is the list of administrative authorities going to be published publicly? How does a ship owner or manager find out? That's every country, is it? Or anybody want to go at this? Øyvind, you look like you're ready to start.
It's a question that I've asked myself, where it's going to be published. I personally hope they're going to publish a list that's available for everyone online, so it's easy to navigate it and see where the different ships end up. But I'm still a little bit uncertain about it.
Oh, there we go. Well, we've got a. Oh, there we go. Charlotte from the Lodestar journalist. Albrecht, you're typing. Maybe we'll give this one orally as the last one. Yeah, verification of each. I don't think it's compulsory to get everything verified, is it? But
But
Sorry.
I mean, you need to
Oh.
verify the data. That's part of the regulation, but in theory, it's only required on an annual basis. And I had the previous question, I think, from you there. Yes, it's you need to do it, and yes, there is a fee for the service. I'm not at liberty to display the fees in the industry. There are many providers who are doing this. And what you can do to help your settlement processes is obviously do it in a smaller rhythm, because for each invoice you send or each payment you need to make, you want to base it on verified data in order to avoid claims and whatnot. And that's why we're discussing it so much. Obviously, if more verification happens, that comes with extra fees. Nothing is for free in this world, unfortunately. But there's different providers, different prices in the market. So everyone who's interested there should reach out to those offerings and find out what they need. Yeah.
Wow, very good. We've got about
Yes,
5 minutes left. Should we do a
Mhm.
1 minute sum up? Maybe Albrecht, Oyvind, and Friederike, if there's what you'd like to leave people with. I mean, I think what we're leaving people with is phenomenally complicated, and this has been the most complicated webinar I can remember.
Let me start in the order that we started earlier. I don't think it's that complicated, to be honest. I think
All
it's
right, very good.
clarifying now, and it has all these dimensions, and there are complexities to it. But I believe that in the end, most players here will have, in a few months from now, settled on their way of doing it, have settled on their processes, on their philosophies for this, and it will work. And I think I'm speaking for the three of us that we believe trying Excel alone will probably lead you to some limits in this, unless you're a single vessel company, maybe. That's why we are here for. But our job is to make this complexity simple. I think that's what we all three stand for in different ways. I would say don't be afraid after the seminar, but maybe see this as a call for action if there are still open spots on your agenda.
Oh, Oyvind, want to give a minute? Where you want to leave it?
Yeah, if we turn this a little bit around, the ambition to EU here is to reduce the carbon footprint in its region of the world, and in that sense, this is positive for all of us. So this is a positive initiative. It's complex, but we will overcome that. And I think also that the devil is a little bit in the details here, that each ship owner and charter out there, they are different in one way or the other, and that this needs to be sort of reflected in how you act upon it, and then talking to people who has insight into how this is done in the industry, I think is valuable. But I totally agree with Albrecht that this is something that we will overcome, and then hopefully it's for the good for all of us, basically.
Oh, Friederike, you want the last word?
Yeah, I very much agree. So I think, for example, all this complication about the accounts in the union registry, that's the initial phase of the system, right? Eventually, we will have this settled, and then we can focus on the actual business implications. And I think these are important to observe and understand. It's easy to get trapped in those bureaucracy things, but the much more important stuff is to look at the financial risk from this and to understand it early and to make sure that you get your money back, that you don't sit on those ETS costs. And that, for us, is the primary reason why we want to organize this process in a very good way. And so I think this you should focus on and figure out the administrative stuff as soon as possible and get it out of the way.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. Well, that's the end of the webinar. So thank you very much, Albrecht, Oyvind, and Friederike. That's extremely interesting. We're going to put a video of this on YouTube if you want to watch it again, because there's so many details. And also we ask people if you want consent to share contact details. So where people have agreed, we'll share them afterwards if you want to carry it on. So thank you very much. And our next digital ship webinar will be on the 1st of February with Tokua, when we're talking about big data in ship performance management, and you can book online on our website. So thank you very much, and goodbye. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.